A reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 6, from verse 14 to chapter 7 and verse 1. Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? And what concord hath Christ with Belial? Or what part hath he that believeth with an infidel? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. As God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore, come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you, and will be a father unto you, and ye shall be my sons and daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. Having therefore these promises, dearly beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. The passage just read is the beginning point for two addresses that I'm tasked with bringing to you on the subject of Christian rap and hip-hop. When Paul wrote to the church in Corinth and had to challenge them once again about their conduct and attitude, the need for separation was paramount. The indulgence of immorality by some in the church was still a matter of great concern to the apostle. Despite earlier warnings, some still had not taken to heart the dangers of flirting with the world or bringing its conduct and mores into the life of the church. Part of the difficulty was the superiority that some of them were feeling in regard to the apostle. With his troubles, afflictions, thorns in the flesh, imprisonments, persecutions, he hardly was a match for the version of Christianity being showcased by the new breed of leaders. Their lifestyles, revelations, and offices put the apostle into the shade. And so to such people, this urgent warning came. This is what was at stake: the way of righteousness or unrighteousness, light or darkness, Christ or the devil, believers or infidels, the temple of God or idols. That was their choice then. Such is the choice that lies before us, I believe, in the matter of rap music and hip-hop. Over the course of these two addresses, we'll be doing the weighing with this context very much in our minds from 2 Corinthians chapter 6. So, how are we going to proceed? First of all, we'll do some defining of the object of our study. There are inevitably some generalizations to make, but hopefully we'll arrive at some understanding of what hip-hop is out in the world. Then we shall move on to look at the origins of this phenomenon. This will take us into some fairly new territory, I suspect, for many of us. We shall be learning about people, places, lifestyles that are very remote from our immediate experience, though perhaps not for all of us. Please be patient at this point. I want us to be clear in our understanding. Looking at hip-hop's provenance will help us judge more accurately its suitability for its use in worship, teaching, and evangelism. There will be some unsavory things we'll need briefly to mention as we go along. But there are also some very sad things to allude to. These highlight poignantly what life without Christ can end up like for some. Though I claim to be no expert, I will also chart the development of hip-hop culture into its present form. Of necessity, we'll have to omit much of the detail. Indeed, some of it is too depraved and horrible to relate. I'll then make some comments about the use of secular hip-hop by the Christian. So, if any of us are in any way taken up with hip-hop culture and music, please listen carefully at this point. After that, I want to chart the movement of hip-hop culture into the church. I will speak a little about some of the people who've been part of this. We will particularly note some of the people who've been responsible for bringing this music into the Reformed evangelical church. Here, I am overlapping with the addresses of Dr. Ted Williams, as the Reformed hip-hop story is also in part the story of the New Calvinism. You will see that the same names crop up and the same issues of concern that revolve around worldliness. After this, we shall ask some questions about Christians performing hip-hop and Christians receiving as consumers reformed hip-hop. We will look at the nature of the music and what that is communicating to us. Then we shall finish by listing some of the principles that should guide our thinking concerning issues such as public worship, personal sanctification, and spiritual experience. Here, we will have to do some hard thinking about music and its role in our emotional life. Rap music may not be featuring too large yet in the UK church. There are some exponents within, for example, New Frontiers. But it is big and getting bigger in the United States. So we need to be clear in our understanding and well informed in our response. Dismissing this as the worship wars, a matter of taste, a cultural issue or a generational issue indicates a failure, I think, to see the importance of the matter at hand. I cannot say all that needs to be said on this question, but I hope to be able to say something at least. But there are a few caveats and disclaimers I would also like to make. While it is a matter of historical record that hip-hop began in black culture, what is expressed is a problem of all cultures, namely sin. The biggest consumers of hip-hop are, in fact, white people. While the operation of sin in any given culture may produce some variety, the underlying issues remain the same. In this regard, there is no open invitation to look down on any particular culture. All cultures badly need the salt and light influence of a powerful Christian witness. Neither, I hope, am I excluded from having anything helpful to say because I happen to be male and pale, as the common phrase now is. It is patently obvious that in the secular world of hip-hop, by and large, women are degraded and treated with total disrespect. Though I am male, and the fairer sex is not permitted in Scripture, the platform that I am able to enjoy here, I hope I can identify with you and express a degree of outrage at the way your sex is depicted in much of hip-hop. So, with these comments made, let us proceed to give a fuller definition of the object of our concern. The question being this: what is hip-hop? Hip-hop is essentially a style, an approach summed up by the very unscientific phrase, cool. To elaborate more, it is a demeanour of apparent detachment from the mainstream culture, from its expectations, rules and conduct. It is a statement of individuality, personal creativity and self-esteem, unworried by the views of other people. It is an expression of self-confidence, conveying an impression to others that one is worthy of respect. Thus, hip-hop communicates in its cultural setting a way of life that is free, self-fulfilling, independent, stylish, and status-enhancing. The name itself is in some dispute as to who first coined the term. But the hip part speaks about something being up to date. The hop part refers to the kind of energetic dancing associated with it. Now, we'll be homing in on the music in due course. But as I've already suggested, we must recognize that hip-hop is more than just the music. Its aspirations and view of the good life is expressed in a variety of ways. It has its own dress code. Certain products are in, certain products are out. Hats, caps, shirts, trousers, trainers, and sunglasses conform to the brands that are thought to be cool. The trousers, in the opinion of some, need to be virtually falling down in order to be really cool. There are certain types of car that are good to be seen in. Various types of alcohol are fashionable. Presently, cognac is showcased by some of the big names. Then there is the bling, or bling-bling. This is the ostentatious jewellery that is worn. Medallions, bracelets, or whatever else might be flavour of the month. These all convey status and set the standards for what is to be envied and copied. Then there is the language. Hip-hop has developed its own words and phrases. We may have heard the term diss as a way of speaking down something. It is from the world of hip-hop. So here I am, in effect, dissing hip-hop. Then there is the greeting, yo. This is hip-hop. Indeed, former President George W. Bush was heard to greet former Prime Minister Tony Blair with a comradely, yo Blair. Graffiti is the visual art form linked to hip-hop. The covering of subway trains in New York with various tags, pictures and slogans was part of its culture. It expressed a disregard for rules, a statement of defiance against the mainstream culture, and the expression of one's own tastes, laced with hints of danger and risk. Urban art has evolved from this so that it has now, as with so much of hip-hop, become mainstream itself. What was once the culture of the outsider, challenging the powers to be, is now the art that is bought by the people who are the powers that be. Coming nearer to the music is the break dancing that accompanies much of the musical output. Originally known as b-boying, it is an energetic, aggressive, and acrobatic form of dancing which gives shape and movement to hip-hop. That it too has gone mainstream is witnessed by the fact that Hollywood has various films about breakdancing. It can now be observed all over the world, including here in the UK. Dance classes in breakdancing are commonplace. Coupled to the music is the video accompanying the release of new records, CDs, or internet-based material. With suggestive dancing and an often sleazy feel, the appeal of this to fallen young people is only too apparent. But of course, there is the music, which defined in the early days what hip-hop was. At its heart was a clever and novel use of an extremely loud and syncopated beat, and an equally loud bass line. In the early days, DJs honed their skills in mixing together the works of original artists to produce a continuous set of strong beats and loud bass. The impact on people was to inspire them to dance more energetically and to generally go wild. The pioneering DJs studied how best to produce this kind of dancing in people and to generate for them the most fun, in inverted commas. Melody and the use of harmony were out in favour of these loud and aggressive sounds. Superimposed on top of this sound, speaking along with the beat that was being thumped out, was the rhyming input of what we call the rapper. Beginning sometimes with a simple punctuation of the music with shouts or comment, this became an art form in itself. Derived from a practice in Jamaica called toasting, the rappers were known as MCs, and their skills included being able to rhyme what they were saying with a rapid-fire delivery. As the need for DJs waned, the advent of technology, which could reproduce the sound of the drums and put together the dance-inspiring bass lines, so the MC assumed greater prominence. These are the rap singers, who are the famous figureheads of hip-hop culture and who can command huge incomes and enjoy a great fan following. Very briefly, historically, we can trace the beginnings of hip-hop back to the Jamaica of the 1960s and 1970s. In the wake of independence and with growing confidence to articulate a new way forward, the music of reggae came to be the cultural expression of the excitement and aspirations of the young. Though Bob Marley was the most well-known figure, he was not alone in putting together music that could excite the young and make them dance. The music came to define the political and religious hopes and aims of the nation. Now that was in the cultural DNA of a young lad called Clive Campbell, who at the age of 12 came to New York to join his parents and his older sister. He lived in the Badlands of the South Bronx, where gangs jealously guarded their turf and where violence, including murder, was commonplace. But moves were afoot to end the violence after one particularly shocking killing, and gangs were now in the mood to make truces. Young Clive Campbell had watched the parties that his sister was hosting. He tinkered around with sound systems and came up with a way of producing more sound. To this was added the result of an observation he had made. It was he who noticed that people danced more frantically when the singing on any given record gave way to a section called a break, when it was just music and the instrumentalists let rip. With drums thumping away and bass to shake the place down, the party-goers would dance wildly and without inhibition. Clive Campbell, now renamed DJ Cool Herc, contraction of Hercules, staged his own parties. The gangs would come and instead of fighting would party. So in 1979, in a tough part of the Bronx in New York, what came to be known as hip-hop was born. Other key figures in the early days included former gang leader Africa Bambaataa, who developed a group called Zulu Nation. Another early pioneer was Grandmaster Flash, who led a group called the Furious Five. Now, these developments were confined to an area of 7 miles in circumference in the Bronx area of New York. But it was not long before the sound of hip-hop was discovered by the clubs of Manhattan. The potential for this new sound to reach a global market was quickly appreciated. A small, little-known record label released a record called Rapper's Delight in 1979. It was not recorded by one of the bigger names, but by a group called Sugar Hill Gang. But its success astonished all. Hip-hop, from being the speciality of a confined area of the Bronx, was now reaching the world. Big business soon saw the commercial value of this new phenomenon, and record followed record. In recognition of the global reach of hip-hop, Zulu Nation put together a recording and labelled it Planet Rock. The uptake through the 1980s was rapid, and the sounds and cultural accoutrements of hip-hop were now being experienced worldwide. Public Enemy, another rap group, toured widely, reaching Europe and South Africa. Hip-hop also began to take off from the west coast of the United States. But this had a decidedly different feel. Shaped by the Los Angeles riots of 1992, the themes were more of violence, anger against the police, the carrying of weapons and the use of drugs. What came to be known as gangster rap emerged and went on to become the dominant form of hip-hop music. This change, of course, was encouraged by the big record labels, who felt this edgier theme had greater commercial appeal. Some of these more violent characters ended up themselves being shot or knifed in gang-type murders, revenge killings, and the like. Ironically, having begun as something that was intended to persuade people to give up their weapons, was now being used to take up weapons again. So hip-hop is more than the music. It is a culture, a way of doing things, of speaking, of looking, which can be summed up as cool. It is a dispassionate, streetwise, real-life, non-conforming, in-control image, with the music, clothes, language, and lifestyle to match. I now want to make some comments about secular hip-hop and the Christian. Seeing danger in hip-hop is not the sole preserve of the church. In 2006, David Cameron, when leader of the opposition, made a statement about the danger hip-hop posed to young people. He deplored the encouragement it gave them to carry and use knives. So this is where we need to pause and take stock for a moment. Today, much, though not all, secular hip-hop idealizes a crassly materialistic outlook to life, setting before its followers the kind of clothes, jewelry, houses, cars, and lifestyles that they are to aspire to. It is totally ungodly, let alone whether, as a lifestyle, it could realistically be achieved by the majority of its foot soldiers. The taking of drugs and the use of alcohol are routine matters and feature in its content. This is where we must make our comments very pointed. Is this the kind of music we're listening to? Do we have heroes among the ranks of the hip-hop stars? Are we fans of any of these artists? What does the Bible say to us? Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 and 16. Or 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Referring back to 2 Corinthians chapter 6, what have believers to do with this world of covetousness and materialism? What fellowship has light with darkness? Should we be exposing ourselves to these messages or supporting these people? Have we made idols out of these singers and these groups? The materialism on display and the encouragement to reach up for this kind of life is in direct contrast to what the Lord teaches us. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 8, and having food and raiment, let us be therewith content. Or Philippians 4, verse 11, not that I speak, says Paul, in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am therewith to be content. Rubbing shoulders with hip-hop culture, are we not in danger of sharing their outlook, wanting the items that they regard as cool? These are not good role models. They introduce us to a way of living which is against the word of God. But there is more that needs to be said. I mentioned earlier that we'll be touching upon the poor treatment of women. This is one of the recurring criticisms made about hip-hop culture by those that still wish to be known as its friends. In many of the lyrics and promotional videos, men are presented as powerful people, holding women in humiliating subjection. Women are simply sexual objects and are required to dress and behave accordingly. It is utterly ungodly and depraved, and it is endemic in secular hip-hop. This is an open invitation to sexual misconduct and to the cultivation of ungodly thoughts. Surely none of us are indulging in this music and its accompanying videos. Surely none of us are absorbed in these kinds of thoughts or looking at the fairer sex in this lascivious and evil way. We should be putting immense distance between ourselves and this type of output. What does the Bible say? 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18, flee fornication. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 22, flee also youthful lusts, but follow righteousness, faith, charity, peace, with them that call on the name of the Lord out of a pure heart. The Bible does not invite us to flirt with this material or parley with it, but to flee from it. It is not doing any good to those who are part of that world. It will not do anything good for our thought life and will bring toxic material into our hearts, leaving us spiritually and morally weakened. Young men are to be exemplary in their conduct towards women folk. Women are not your objects for your crude fascination, much less for your control and cruel subjection. Young women, have the courage to dignify your sex with chaste conduct, with dress codes that are not off the street. Any man that wants you to behave like the poor women in these videos is no Christian and therefore no suitable partner for you. Dare to be different. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. We are looking to find that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. The Lord will not reveal it to those who present their bodies as instruments of unrighteousness. Sadly, this element of sexual license was there in hip-hop from the early days in New York. It may, in its early incarnation, have avoided some of the excesses of violence and drug abuse, but it was never clear of this sensual world of sexual immorality. Its ideas of fun were never a Christian notion. While we would not attach all the blame to hip-hop for the present desperately low standards in personal conduct, it has, nevertheless, faithfully mirrored the culture around it and re-exported it back into the wider culture with its own original twist. In keeping with the decline of standards across different cultures, hip-hop has served the enemy of souls to enslave a whole new generation of young people. What vanity, what emptiness. So now we move on, specifically to look at Christian hip-hop. So with these warnings ringing in our ears, we turn now to engage with the phenomenon which will take up our attention for the remainder of today and tomorrow, namely so-called Christian hip-hop. Just as hip-hop outgrew its original home in the southern Bronx in New York, likewise it has migrated into the church. The first commercially released Christian rap album was Stephen Wiley's Bible Break, which came out in 1985. One of the early commercial successes was a group called PID, Preachers in Disguise. The Roman Catholic Church has its own brand of rap musicians, but we are particularly going to home in on some of the artists who are making waves among the new Calvinists. They have their own website called Reformed Rappers, where some of their output can be sampled. One well-known rapper is Shai Linne, who is based in Philadelphia. Converted through the witness of a woman he met, in 2002 he began to release recordings under the Lamp Mode record label. He performs in various churches and has been acclaimed for his material on the atonement, among other things. Curtis Allen is a pastor at the Solid Rock Church in Prince George's County, Maryland. This belongs to the charismatic Sovereign Grace Ministries stream of churches, which until recently at least was headed up by C.J. Mahaney. Converted out of a very troubled background in Washington, D.C., he studied on their pastor's training program. It was he who, in 2007, made a groundbreaking and controversial visit to Bethlehem Baptist Church in Minneapolis, the church pastored by John Piper. Perhaps the best-known Reformed rapper in the States is Lecrae Moore, better known simply as Lecrae. He too grew up on the streets and pursued the same dream as many young men of his age. But he listened to a Christian speaker and was converted. He also has worked alongside John Piper and brought out a song, Don't Waste Your Life, to go alongside the book of that name that John Piper authored. He has appeared at some of the larger gatherings which John Piper attends, such as Passion, headed up by Louis Gilliot. For instance, he was there at the large Atlanta meeting earlier this year. Clips viewable on the internet show it as being indistinguishable from a pop concert. Sympathetic treatments of rap have also been aired on Al Mohler's radio program. Likewise, the Regeneration Camp for Young People, sponsored by John MacArthur's church, have had Lecrae to perform, as have events at the Master's College. Much of the material on the internet is there to educate Christians in church doctrine. Other matters, such as Lecrae produces, are aiming to be more evangelistic, so there is a variety. And if I could start with something positive, were we simply dealing with the lyrics, we would have to say that there is much to admire. There is some very sound doctrine, as well as pointed warnings against false teachers. One is also compelled to say there is remarkable skill in being able to sustain the rhyming at such speed. Some of the rhyming is highly imaginative. So we do not doubt the skill, nor do we doubt the theology of some of these practitioners. But I would suggest we can draw little comfort from this. I'm going to argue the case more fully tomorrow, but the soundest of lyrics lose their power to influence or impress compared to the power of the music. Whatever message the type of music is conveying will drown out the best of teaching and the most cleverly constructed poetry. The medium is the message. The music is not neutral or amoral. Different types of music have a moral value, either good or bad. We'll develop that thought more fully tomorrow. But I want to finish this morning by looking at the subject of hip-hop as performance and entertainment. Hip-hop as performance and entertainment. How can it be justified, the wedding of the proclamation of truth, with something which, when all is said and done, is a performance using degraded worldly props? I've not seen every performance or recording that these artists have produced, but I have sampled a fair few. While I am no expert on the making of a pop video, I think I see resemblances between what the world does here, as described earlier, and what the Christian hip-hop artists are about. The artist is being presented as a package. He or she has a style, has a personality, has an art that needs to be presented in much the same way that the world would go about promoting a performer. The clothing worn may not be as outrageous or downright immoral as the non-Christian variety we were looking at a moment ago, but it is still communicating cool. I have yet to find a Christian hip-hop performer who is dressed as I am today. Now, we are still culturally close to our cousins in the United States, and while T-shirts and open-neck shirts abound on the conference platforms and pulpits of the new Calvinists, ties and suits have not quite become extinct. I notice that President Obama, when addressing the nation, is in a suit. He has something important to say and needs to convey gravitas. This is how he dresses. Interestingly, Louis Farrakhan, the Nation of Islam leader, who has forged connections with the world of hip-hop, dresses immaculately, even when speaking to gatherings of hip-hop movers and shakers. He wants his message to be heard seriously. He wants to be heard, however unhelpful the message to our mind may be. Interestingly too, many in his audience of hip-hop stars dress quite formally at these functions. Such is their respect for the man who is speaking to them. But that is not how Shai Linne or Curtis Allen or Lecrae dress, even though they are, as lyrical preachers, teaching us about the Trinity or the death of Christ or taking us through the Bible in 4 minutes. Whether in the promotional videos or in performance, the dress code is urban or street, or what we have defined earlier as cool. So let's put them in a suit and tie and get them performing the same things. No problem, is there, with that? Oh, it wouldn't work the same way, would it? There is a mismatch. The image is all wrong. For these people are not wanting to look like preachers or presidents or heads of global corporations. Despite the fact they're conveying vital spiritual truths, they instinctively feel the need to dress as befits hip-hop. Not the bling, not the flash cars, but definitely the street look. They need to have credibility as men in touch with that culture and able to cut it at that level. They need to look like performers who fit in the world of rap artists. Watching Shai Linne at a meeting, it was interesting that though he was performing to a predominantly white audience, the dress code was the same. The congregation, that is what it was, were dressed in nigh identical fashion. This is the style. This is the image. To have dressed any differently would have taken them out of that image of cool and created a discord. Their affinity to the world of hip-hop and the need to dress like that belongs in that world shouts out to us. So as a performer, much of their credibility in the eyes of their public comes from using the props of the hip-hop world. Besides that, there is the atmosphere, albeit sometimes toned down, of the hip-hop event. Not all of the events are the same. Some are in a church, some in another kind of auditorium or a venue. But when they are recognisably in concert, the sound is loud. The band is pumped up. There are swaying figures on the stage as accompanists. The audience is likewise swaying and moving to the music. The lights are down. There are background images floating around. Sometimes there are large-size images of the rappers and musicians beamed to the audience. It is hip-hop light, but it is hip-hop nonetheless. Without these additional features, without the style, without the sense of event, there would be nothing to say, nothing to hear. So they might have some serious things to say, but it is still a performance. And as befits a performance, people feel compelled to applaud at the end. After one of these performances, Shai Linne is heard saying some very good things about the gospel. But he has to say it against the background of having just been a performer with an admiring public. He nobly and humbly tries to deflect attention away from himself to Christ. We doubt not the sincerity of this, nor Lecrae, when he is heard saying that Christ must increase and that he, Lecrae, must decrease. But it's a lost cause. The man, as a performer, remains in view. He is first and foremost a hip-hop artist trading on the dress code of hip-hop world and putting on a hip-hop performance. The applause proves that this is how people respond to him as such. The gospel, however, does not belong in the world of performers, artists, and entertainers. It is not something that has to borrow from the credibility of someone who is an entertainer or a performer. It does not have to be buoyed along by the applause of people or gather momentum from being spoken by someone who is obviously cool and does cool things. The inappropriateness of this is only underscored by the fact that the elements of cool giving cover to the gospel are borrowed from an ungodly and God-hating culture. We've looked at where hip-hop has come from. Christian hip-hop is borrowing from its worldly, secular counterpart for credibility. The dress code, the symbols, and the music are part of a system that is deceiving people and spiritually killing them. Suits and ties do not automatically communicate a worldview and a lifestyle, but hip-hop does. The clothing of hip-hop is making a statement about the lifestyle and attitude, and that statement is not God-honouring. The hip-hop artists may try to speak against the mainstream and its emptiness, but they've already too closely identified themselves with it. As performers, to want to form any association with that unclean world seems extraordinary. Why touch its music? Why dress as it does? Why not move 100 miles away from it? Why not rather hate the garment spotted? To make that polluted thing a platform for giving credibility to a holy God seems offensive. This works both for those who are the performers as well as those we can call the consumers of Christian hip-hop. I mentioned how the audiences dress as one would perhaps expect people who belong to hip-hop culture to dress. They may applaud the mentions of the cross or the blood of Christ. They may enjoy the references to election or particular redemption. You may watch it on the internet or download it to an MP3. But as consumers, we too are sharing in the world of hip-hop. We too are permitting the gospel, Christ, precious truths, to come to us courtesy of a medium that is saturated in a lifestyle of immorality, power, aggression, and materialism. We're basically differing from Scripture and thinking that something associated with darkness can be the vehicle for bringing us light. We are reckoning that what belongs to the world of unrighteousness will build us up in practical righteousness and holiness. We're importing the world's idols of aggression and materialism and the tastes of the infidel to train us in the ways of holiness. But doesn't the Word of God tell us to cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit? Are we not to fear God and stop behaving in such a way as may bring dishonour to his glory? Our actions assert that the Lord will confer his blessing, including personal holiness, while having his truth dressed in the garb of immorality, materialism, and the pursuit of personal status. To have Christ relying on the art of a performer whom we admire and applaud is bad enough. To then have his glory brought to us by performance saturated in the style of a culture of licentiousness, aggressive self-assertion, and covetousness is a betrayal. So we finish there this morning. Tomorrow, God willing, we go on to look at the music itself and what that conveys to us, irrespective of the words. Thank you.